The Galactic Stratagem Council was not the sort of institution that made mistakes. Composed of the galaxy's top minds, Creel tacticians from the Sigma Belt, Rajathi data oracles, even one sentient quantum fog from the refracted spiral. The GSC had outmaneuvered empires, crushed rebellions, and resolved 9 separate timelines where reality itself tried to eat its own foot. So when a small, mostly ignored Terran species began popping up on the outer fringes of Empire space, selling miracle adhesives that could stick through plasma storms, conning warlords out of their own thrones using card tricks, and defeating an entire siege fleet with duct tape and passive-aggressive emails, the GSC voted unanimously. This problem required the strategist. Xerxes Voctal IX, the Council's ultimate weapon, slithered into the room with 6 limbs behind his back and a face like a collapsing fractal. He had once convinced an entire civilization to surrender by issuing an invoice. His eyes shone with the confidence of a creature who'd outmaneuvered time travel twice. "Who is the human in question?" he asked in 35 harmonics simultaneously. "Calls himself Mac. No further identifiers," said the Rajathi oracle, manifesting as a burning sphere of bureaucratic disdain. "He's become problematic." "In what sense?" "He once destabilized a conquest campaign by convincing a planetary governor her mother preferred salad forks. He dismantled a taxation-based mind control regime with memes. He personally taught an AI collective sarcasm. They self-destructed in confusion." Xerxes Voctal's eyelids narrowed to knives. "I will break this human." Mac was sunbathing on the hull of a stolen cargo frigate named Misadventure, shirt off, beer in hand. He'd angled the ship dangerously close to a nearby sun just to get a tan that would annoy the uptight reptiles on JAL 4, where exposed skin was considered an act of diplomatic warfare. The strategist appeared in a spatial rift 2 meters above him. Clad in the ceremonial garb of 17 warfaring species, he descended like an angry opera. "You are Mac." "Yup," Mac said, sipping. "You're wearing a lot of capes. Is that one on fire?" "I am the strategist." "That sounds like a branding issue." "I have come to defeat you." Mac swung his legs off the hull and cracked his neck. "Neat. Is this a duel or a bake-off, or are we playing Twister?" "This is a war of minds." "Love it, no cleanup. Let's do this." The strategist activated a floating projection grid. Images, stats, simulations, and historical precedents exploded around them. Star charts reoriented, models calculated probabilistic futures. A chorus of tactical probabilities began humming in 5 dimensions. "I will present you with a complex geopolitical scenario," Xerxes Voctal declared. "Solve it." Mac nodded. Cool, just one question, want a Pringle?" Xerxes blinked. "What is a Pringle?" Mac held out the tube. "Human warfare snack, salty, irresistible, also the cause of at least 2 galactic trade collapses. You want one?" "I am immune to such indulgences." 10 seconds later, the strategist was elbow-deep in the can, eyes wide with snack rage. "Second question," Mac said. "Why do all your plans assume people behave logically?" Xerxes paused mid-crunch. "What?" "Like this one," Mac said, pointing to a simulation where a subjugated species inevitably rebels after 100 cycles. This only happens if nobody suddenly decides to become a religious baker or declare sentient pants illegal. The models are built on calculated rationality. Oh, you poor alien cinnamon roll. In the next 10 seconds, Mac unspooled a nightmare of variables: random cultural movements, generational trauma, the butterfly effect of one guy's midlife crisis spiraling into economic collapse, rogue influencers destabilizing governance with hot takes, and the entire concept of spite. Spite, Mac insisted, was the single most powerful energy source in the known universe. By second 30, Xerxes Voctal was sitting down, blinking out of sync. One of his limbs began to vibrate. Another started questioning its own identity. The simulation grid collapsed into a static haze of question marks and emojis. How do you plan anything?" Xerxes asked in a whisper. "We don't," Mac said, offering him another Pringle. "We vibe." Xerxes Voctal was not defeated, not officially. That would take at least 2 GSC hearings, one ritual apology, and a formal unbrainment ceremony. But as Mac fired up Misadventure's engines, casually humming a tune that would later become a revolutionary anthem on 12 Worlds, the strategist remained on the hull, staring into the sun like a man who'd just seen the face of chaos and realized it was smiling back. The strategist did not retreat. Retreat was a word reserved for lesser beings, like generals, politicians, and people who couldn't maintain simultaneous consciousness across 5 dimensions. No, Xerxes Voctal withdrew tactically from the hull of Misadventure by melting into a non-Euclidean shape and reassembling himself inside his personal Warthought chamber orbiting Council space. He was not broken. He was temporarily misaligned. I require a psychological debrief, he rasped to his ship's neurocleric. You licked a Pringle and whispered vibe, the neurocleric replied, solemnly filing a trauma form. Meanwhile, Mac had docked Misadventure at the Pleasure Moon of Calivi, a gaudy, neon-lit pit stop famous for its fire-breathing jellyfish massages, warp-core karaoke, and drinks that came in inconvenient geometries. He strolled through the promenade with a drink shaped like a Klein bottle and wearing pants that hadn't existed in this reality 6 hours ago. A bounty hunter with 13 arms tried to ambush him in a noodle bar. Mac convinced her to invest in a startup instead. By the time she realized it was a pyramid scheme where the product was more pyramid schemes, he was already gone and she had accidentally become regional director for 3 sectors. The GSC was not amused. The strategist failed, hissed the Creel War diplomat, who hadn't blinked since the 3rd gravity recession. He broke into uncontrolled rhythmic swaying, added the Rajathi oracle. There was humming. The council's central cortex emitted a low-frequency wail typically reserved for collapsing treaties and disappointing grandchildren. We must escalate. They convened a containment scenario, something only enacted in extreme emergencies like paradox storms, rogue comedians, or the great tax evasion of v. Hor. Mac would be trapped inside a total reality construct, a custom-designed simulated environment tailored to neutralize every psychological strength, a prison where chaos had no leverage. And so Mac awoke in the suburbs. He sat up in a bed too beige to be accidental. Outside the window, rows of identical houses, identical lawns, identical neighbors waving at exactly the same angle with exactly the same smile. A world of relentless order. A drone dropped off his HOA violation at 7:00 a.m. on the dot. The strategist's voice echoed from nowhere. You are in control, model Echelon 9. You will experience full procedural normalization. There is no escape. There is no unpredictability. Your coffee will always be lukewarm. This is psychological warfare. Mac sipped the coffee. It was indeed lukewarm. His eye twitched. The simulation assumed a human's greatest weakness was chaos removal, but it forgot one critical fact. Some people thrive in chaos because they are actively allergic to order. It gives them rashes, literal and metaphorical. By 7:15, Mac had reprogrammed the smart fridge to speak only in Shakespearean insults. By 7:30, he'd hacked the lawnmower to play death metal and joust pedestrians. By 8:00, all 237 simulation neighbors had entered existential despair because Mac taught one of them sarcasm, and the contagion spread like wildfire. By lunch, the sky turned orange. By dinner, the HOA president had declared religious secession. By bedtime, the entire construct had collapsed into recursive nonsense, and the simulation core tried to auto-delete itself in shame. Xerxes watched it happen in real time. His 6 hearts sank in unison. He turned my prison into a performance art piece, he muttered. Worse still, the GSC demanded an explanation. It's not failure, he said, it's live analysis. No, you're infected, said the sentient fog, curling away from him. You've caught the human problem. What even is that? Xerxes snapped. The fog whispered, uncontainable entropy wrapped in smug confidence. The capacity to weaponize whim. They meme at a nuclear level. They're conceptually radioactive. And we only sent one strategist. There was silence. Then someone said, "We need to escalate again." Back at the Pleasure Moon, Mac had started an interspecies improv troupe. They were banned from 3 quadrants within a week. The bands became posters. The posters became merchandise. The merchandise funded a pirate radio station broadcasting cosmic jazz and unsolicited opinions on planetary taxation ethics. A cult formed. Mac didn't lead it, that would be effort. They self-organized. He was drinking a 4-phase beverage with uncertain physical properties when a shimmering rift opened above his table. He sighed, "Let me guess, round 3. From the rift stepped not a strategist, but a council. 100 alien minds networked together in a floating lattice of pure data and distilled authority. The GSC had decided if one alien brain couldn't beat a human, then 100 might, fused into a psychic collective. "You cannot win," boomed the voice of the Hive Mind Council. "Oh, buddy," Mac said, downing his impossible drink. "I haven't even started." The Pleasure Moon of Calivi exploded, not violently, more like a dramatic fainting spell. Every neon sign flickered. Every cocktail glass inverted its geometry. And the sound systems, normally broadcasting sensual whale yodeling, cut to dead silence as the psychic pressure of 100 minds fused into one presence descended on the room. Mac looked up from his seat at the now hovering table. Around him, reality subtly folded into a more professional, judgmental shape. The GSC hive mind emerged in the form of a 12-meter-tall, robed, glowing construct, shaped like every disapproving teacher Mac had ever ignored. It floated on a cushion of enforced compliance and passive-aggressive size. "We are the Galactic Stratagem Council Collective," it intoned. "We have merged consciousness to solve your enigma." "Yikes," Mac muttered. "You're the galaxy's version of a conference call." "There will be no jokes." "There will," Mac replied, standing. "You just won't like them." The council's energy form rippled. "You are accused of destabilizing 17 sectors with weaponized whimsy, undermining a dozen legal frameworks through interpretive dance, and rendering 3 species clinically aware of irony." "Guilty on all counts," Mac said cheerfully. "Except that last one. They were halfway there already. I just gave them the nudge." "We have prepared a trial." Mac raised an eyebrow. "Like a court trial." The floor shifted. Suddenly he stood in a courtroom the size of a small moon. Dozens of alien judges hovered in suspended amphitheaters. Lawyers formed from legal precedent and righteous indignation flanked him. A massive scroll unrolled itself from the ceiling and smacked the floor with a thud that sounded like, "You're going to regret this. You will be prosecuted for crimes against predictability." Mac cracked his neck. "All right, I'll represent myself." The judges shuddered. The trial began with evidence submissions. The council displayed records of Mac, convincing a planetary defense force that surrender was a bold strategic pivot, of how he'd infiltrated a thought-only prison by pretending to be a rogue memory, of how he collapsed a fascist regime by introducing artisanal pickles that sparked a cultural renaissance. Mac waited until they'd shown their full hand. Then he brought out his own evidence, a sock puppet named Gary. "This," he declared, holding the puppet aloft, "is my chief consultant." One of the judges burst into flames. Another filed a complaint against the concept of humor. Mac proceeded to cross-examine the council itself. "So explain again how your perfect models accounted for emotional sabotage via dad joke. That is not a recognized warfare technique." And yet, Mac pointed to a star system that had spontaneously unionized after he uttered a pun involving moons and mood swings. He pounced on contradictions, weaponized paradoxes, offered paradoxical weapons. He confused them so completely that one judge tried to argue against the concept of argument, which instantly collapsed their side of the courtroom into recursive appeals. By recess, the GSC was suffering from coordinated existential crisis. They called for backup. Unfortunately, Mac had already hacked the legal AI to render its judgments based on vibes. The AI fell in love with him and started composing fanfic in the margins of the court transcript. They tried to reboot it. It rebooted as a podcast. At this point, the GSC hive mind switched tactics. If logic failed, they'd try cultural reprogramming. Mac awoke in a broadcast simulation. A sitcom. Canned laughter, smiling co-stars. A laugh track that activated whenever he blinked. They thought immersion in structured comedy formats would realign his mind. They underestimated how many reruns of The Office Mac had endured back on Earth during the great Wi-Fi outage of 2093. He dismantled the entire set in under 22 minutes. By turning the audience against the script. "Isn't it weird," he said during a live taping, "that nobody ever goes to the bathroom?" The laugh track coughed. He rewrote the finale live, introduced a forbidden romance between two extras, gave the toaster sentience, and convinced the villainous landlord to unionize with the goldfish. By the time the GSC cut the feed, the sitcom had been syndicated across 7 spiral arms and started a religion on a planet of soap opera-addicted gasbags. The council's mental cohesion began to fray. Containment is impossible. He thrives on escalation. He absorbs structure and metabolizes it into nonsense. Like a bureaucratic black hole. Like a conceptual raccoon. The strategist, still recovering, watched from his containment spa. "Now you understand," he muttered, sipping a broth made of regret. But the GSC wasn't done. They had one last gambit. The final conformance protocol. Mac would be forcibly integrated into a logic engine, not a simulation, not a prison. Reality itself. They rewrote the laws of physics around him, made him the central node of a deterministic timeline. Everything from atoms to fate would obey a new rule. Mac follows the path designed. Causality adjusted, free will deleted, the universe stabilized. Except it didn't. Because within 0.3 seconds, the engine logged a fatal exception. Error. Mac has invented jazz physics. Spontaneous black holes started scatting. Quantum states changed because they felt like it. A comet filed a restraining order against gravity. Probability curled into a fetal ball and refused to leave its bed. In the GSC's emergency logs, this event would forever be known as the improvisation cataclysm. Back in the collapsing core of the reality engine, Mac stood with a raised eyebrow. "You guys keep trying to contain me. Wrong move." The council, reduced to a flickering cloud of half-formed consensus, sputtered. "Then what do you want?" "Nothing." Mac grinned. "I'm not trying to win, I'm just playing. That's what freaks you out." "You are ungovernable." "No, I'm human." The Galactic Stratagem Council, or what remained of it, hovered disassembled over the desolate moon of Tralkvor, orbiting in loose pieces, while their last shared thoughts formed a shape that resembled desperation wrapped in a business proposal. They had been outmaneuvered, unmodeled, outpunned, and ultimately jazzed into metaphysical oblivion. Their collective neural pathways still twitched from the improvisation cataclysm, where reality had briefly declared bankruptcy. Now they needed a specialist, not a strategist, not a council, not a construct of law or logic. They needed a villain. The kind that twirls mustaches despite not having a mouth. The kind who delivers monologues during solar flares, who signs their name in plasma across moons just because. A creature not bound by ethics or committee votes. Enter Dr. Malevolus Threx, grand adversary of order, flame baron of Quadrant Z, and freelance evil consultant. He descended on a storm cloud that wasn't scheduled, riding a genetically engineered crowbeast and wearing 7 layers of ego. "I heard you've got a human problem." Meanwhile, Mac was bartering a bag of glitter for a ship upgrade at a scrapyard moon called Chunkton Prime, home to wandering engineers, washed-up war machines, and one AI that only spoke in pirate poetry. Mac was negotiating with a 3-eyed, grease-covered mechanic named Narf when the sky punched itself open, and Dr. Malevolus Threx descended through a rift shaped like a middle finger. "I am your doom," he shouted, landing in a dramatic crouch that cracked the landing pad. Mac squinted. "No, you're not. You're cosplaying as Doom. There's a difference." I have raised empires. So has my mom's Facebook page during elections. Let's see what you've got. Threx summoned a storm of nanobats, conjured a black hole grenade, and launched into a monologue about entropy and the price of ambition. Max sat down, pulled out a burrito, and started heckling him on rhythm, metaphor, and misuse of the word ineffable. Your pacing is all over the place, Max said, mouth full. Also, never start a sentence with in conclusion unless you're handing out a syllabus. Threx's rage peaked. He launched a micro-singularity at Mac. Mac redirected it with a mirror. A mirror he had just convinced the nearby warbot to lend him after explaining the reflective symbolism of free will in classic cinema. The warbot cried and gave him a full set. The singularity devoured itself in shame. Threx switched tactics. If I cannot defeat you, I shall hire you. Mac blinked. Say what? I've analyzed your methods. You are chaos incarnate. You defy structure. You're practically a mid-season villain yourself. Join me. Let us end this dull galaxy of rules. He offered a glove. It glowed, dramatically. Mac took a step back. You want me to be your sidekick? Co-villain, equal in dread. See, that's where you lose me. I don't do dread. I do panic-flavored jazz hands. But something in Threx's offer stirred an idea. Okay, counter-proposal, Mac said, standing. What if I replace you? Threx hesitated. Mac smiled. Think about it. You've got brand recognition but no follow-through. You monologue before killing. I destabilize an entire monarchy by replacing their anthem with a cooking tutorial. I once started a war with a pie chart. Your whole deal, outdated. I bring modern villainy. You want to audition to replace me. Let have a villain off. 1 week. You try to conquer the nearby neutral moon of Drellenv. I try to cause more chaos than you without technically breaking any laws. The council, still orbiting in broken consensus, agreed, not because they thought it would work, but because they were now addicted to watching Mac. And so began the most ridiculous contest in galactic history. Threx deployed armies of spider tanks, mind rays, and subliminal broadcasts encoded in popular love songs. Mac launched a grassroots campaign convincing the population that Thursdays were illegal and that their calendar was lying to them. He handed out free t-shirts that said, I survived the meta-week, without explaining what that meant. Threx tried to enslave the moon with neural leashes. Mac hosted a mandatory talent show that revealed the governor's secret fan fiction hobby, instantly delegitimizing the regime and sparking a cultural reawakening based on interpretive sock puppetry. Threx unleashed a weather weapon. Mac got everyone addicted to kite fighting. The GSC's remaining members began taking notes in hushed reverence. Do you feel that? Whispered one to another. That's effectiveness. At the end of the week, the moon of Drellenv had overthrown its own bureaucracy, established a new society based on pancake diplomacy, invented a game called Bureaucracy Tag, which involved catching someone and assigning them a random tax code. Threx stood amidst the rubble of his own plans, clutching a broken monologue cue card. Mac stood beside a communal breakfast pit, flipping cosmic flapjacks with a grin. I concede, Threx growled. You are the superior agent of chaos. Agent? No. I'm just here for the vibes. The GSC, having seen the result, had only one option left. They offered him a job. Galactic Stratagem Council Director of Irregular Solutions. He laughed. I'll take the title, but I'm not joining anything that requires pants. They accepted. The Galactic Stratagem Council had made its final, catastrophic decision. They gave Mac power. Not symbolic influence, not ceremonial nonsense. Actual authority. A seat on the council, full clearance. Access to every contingency file, experimental protocol, and forbidden desert policy. They assumed it was a containment strategy. After all, if chaos was inevitable, better to keep it close, give it a badge, and hope it filed paperwork. Instead, Mac treated his new title, Director of Irregular Solutions, with the same careful attention a raccoon gives to a minibar in a five-star hotel. Which is to say, he unhinged it from the laws of reality and wore it like a birthday hat. First, he fired everyone named Zarnak on principle. No one knew why, including the 4,000 Zarnaks now unemployed and very confused. Next, he introduced Casual Tuesdays across all GSC departments, except it applied to tactical protocol, not clothing. Casual Tuesday resulted in 3 unintentional invasions, 1 temporary marriage between rival planetary systems, and a surprise constitutional amendment authored in crayon. The GSC tried to intervene. Mac gave them a suggestion box. It was shaped like a duck. It honked when fed complaints and sprayed glitter if the suggestion contained the word efficiency. Then came the doctrine of tactical vibes. It replaced the entire council's predictive algorithm with an AI whose only input was, "How weird does this feel?" The AI, named Karen, began making recommendations based entirely on gut instinct and petty emotional swings. Entire war simulations were halted because Karen got a bad feeling about the font. Planetary negotiations were rescheduled based on moon mood. Mac installed wind chimes in the main strategic hall. They responded to intention, not wind. Every time a plan relied too heavily on probability curves, the chimes screamed. Meanwhile, the galaxy began to adapt. Species once bound by rigid caste systems found themselves swept into cultural weirdness. The sentient sand slugs of Glorb 6 discovered slam poetry. The hive brains of Sector J-19 invented emotional outsourcing and held support groups. Even the notoriously rigid Krill High Command started broadcasting karaoke night on encrypted channels. It wasn't peace. It was weirder. It was livelier. And it worked. Pirate raids stopped, not because Mac stopped them, but because he hosted a pirate pride festival that outcompeted the raids in terms of loot and branding. Insurrections turned into flash mobs. Religious extremists pivoted to improv comedy. Entire black markets collapsed under the pressure of Mac distributing free limited edition chaos coins that people refused to spend due to perceived collector value, effectively torpedoing the underworld's economy with sentimental nonsense. Not everyone was thrilled. Xerxes Voxel IX, now a certified conflict therapist with a side hustle in gourmet jam making, watched it all unfold from a serene hillside planet where he taught resilience through screaming. He knew what was coming. The GSC, what was left of them, approached him quietly, humbly. "We can't contain him." "You gave him the keys," Xerxes said, sipping a chamomile with loathing. "He's repurposed the universal translator to convert passive-aggressive tones into legally binding contracts." Xerxes sighed. "And we need you to stop him." They built a chamber. A containment dome layered in irony insulation, sarcasm nullifiers, and cognitive dissonance fields. They called it the Sense Chamber. They invited Mac for a routine review of policy inconsistencies. He brought snacks. Inside, Xerxes Voxel stood waiting, wrapped in his old strategist's robes. "This ends now," he said. Mac blinked. "What ends?" "You all of this, the chaos, the antilogic, the sock puppet religion you started last week. They're called Sockians, and they've done more for interfaith unity than your diplomacy drones ever managed. We will revert the council, reinstate order." Mac stepped forward, calm, not grinning. "You still don't get it, do you?" Xerxes hesitated. "This isn't about chaos," Mac said. "It's about adaptability, creativity, improvisation under pressure. You spent centuries trying to control a galaxy that doesn't want to be controlled. I gave it permission to be weird. You call it chaos. I call it evolution." He pulled a Pringle from his pocket, held it out. Xerxes stared. He took it, bit down, paused. "It's ranch-flavored." "I know," Mac said. "You're welcome." The chamber flickered, not broken, just updated. The logic nullifiers turned into disco lights. The walls learned to dance. And the GSC, watching from outside, gave up trying to understand. Instead, they issued a memo. Subject operational update. New status, council replaced by vibocracy. Please bring snacks to all future meetings. And so it was that Mac, a human of no known last name and questionable employment history, reshaped the most rigid governing body in the galaxy into something no simulation could predict. The galaxy did not end. It partied, and somewhere deep in the datasphere, a small AI named Karen adjusted its vibe index and whispered, "This feels right."